Hello, everybody. Welcome to Game On Summit 2021. I am Bowie, your event organizer for today. And today I have the honor and the privilege of having a one-on-one fireside chat with Robby Yung, the CEO of Animoca Brands. For those of you who don't know, Animoca brand ranked in the Financial Times list of the high growth companies Asia Pacific 2021. It's the leader in the digital entertainment, blockchain, and gamification. Animoca brand's portfolio companies include blockchain investment and partnership, including Axie Infinity, Data Labs, where you all know CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shops, OpenSea, and Alien Worlds and its subsidiary, including the Sandbox, Gamey, Andway, Pistol, and many more companies. So good to have you, Robby.
Thanks for having me, Bowie. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. So could you please give a quick introduction of yourself so that all the audience get to know about you?
Sure. So I'm, Robby Yung. I'm, as you said, the CEO of Animoca Brands. I've been with the company now for about 10 years. I've spent my whole career in TMT. So I started out in telecoms and did that for many years. And then during the first sort of internet wave of the World Wide Web in the 90s, I had my first startup in the late 90s. And that's actually how I met Yat, who is the co-founder of Animoca Brands, because we both had our Web 1.0 startups at that time. And then after the internet bubble crashed in 2000, I spent a decade in traditional media, so TV, advertising, outdoor, and radio. And then I came back to tech. So with Animoca Brands, back in 2011, 12, when I joined, we were really focused just purely on mobile free-to-play gaming. And as you can tell from the name of the business, one of the strategies that we've always had has been working with licensed brands as a brand partner, helping them to extend their fan base and their user base. And we make great games featuring their cool IPs. So that's something that's always been a specialty for us. And then about 3 years ago, we pivoted to focus exclusively on kind of the newest area of gaming, which is where the intersection of blockchain and games. So we've been just focused on blockchain gaming now since the end of 2017.
I personally have been following Animoca Brands for quite some time. As a matter of fact, back in 2018, I already hosted Animoca Brand once. So back to the topic. OpenSea, the largest marketplace for non-fungible tokens or NFT, has recorded a 3.4 billion transaction volume on Ethereum just in August. So more than 10 times the number in July, according to Dune Analytics. So how will you explain or describe the concept of NFT to a person with zero knowledge?
Sure. So an NFT is a non-fungible token. What a token is essentially on the blockchain. It's a piece of information on a blockchain, and so that means that it's recorded on the blockchain, and it's highly secure and unchangeable, so that we can all agree that there's a public record of who owns something, this token. And the great thing about being able to have those tokens, and some tokens can be, cryptocurrency, like a Bitcoin, for example, and non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are a particular kind of token that can have embedded software, a smart contract inside. And so what that means is that we can actually program that token to do certain things, which is really cool. And that means that the token itself can be many things. It's not just simply like a Bitcoin. It's a currency. It's a store of value. A non-fungible token can be an asset inside a video game, for example. It can be a concert ticket. It can be a property deed to your house. It's basically a permanent digital record that can be exchanged from one party to another. And this is really exciting, particularly in the game business, because it means that we can now actually create content using these NFTs inside games. And this content can then be owned by players, because we can pass the ownership of those tokens, those NFTs, onto the players. And so when we start to think about expanding the way in which value, People have been playing games for many, many years. Games have been based on this free-to-play model for many years where people spend virtual currency inside games and they buy virtual items. And this is a behavior that gamers are very, very familiar with. However, in traditional games, you don't actually own all those items in the game, meaning those items only exist inside that one game, and it's up to the developer what you, the player, can do with them. Even though you bought them, you can only do whatever the game developer allows. Whereas in a blockchain game, when those items are tokenized as NFTs, you, the player, when you buy that in-game item, you can do whatever you like with it. So for example, if you come to our F1 Delta Time game, which is a Formula One driving game, you can buy a Formula One car inside the game, you can play with it. So far, so good, just like any other racing game. But then you can take that F1 car outside the game and put it on OpenSea and trade it with other players. For example, that's one use case. You can take that F1 Delta Time car out of the game and take it to our Rev Racing game and bring it to another game. And so that's a different use case. So it's a very, very exciting field because now that we're able to leverage NFTs in creating games, we can pass ownership to players and we can allow players to transport their items in between games. And these are two things that I think all gamers would desire in the games that they play.
Yes, I actually agree totally because I think the main key point is the digital ownership and be able to prove the ownership and also the capability of transferring the ownership from one another. So, but what is the importance of NFT? Yeah, we talk about gaming
Mm-hmm.
as as an example for digital
Sure,
asset, but what is so important about it?
sure. So NFTs are the first time, I mean, NFTs and blockchain generally are the most secure technology that we have so far developed as humans in order to transfer value from one of us to the other. So this is another reason why people are often calling blockchain Web3. So if you look at, the first and second iterations of the World Wide Web, were all about file transfers. So you go into your web browser and you download video, you download text, you download images, and you can upload them as well. So you can have a two-way transfer of these three kinds of files. So we can exchange files. But if I want to send you something of value, if I want to send you money, or right, there are very few ways that we can do that over the traditional web that are highly secure. There are many ways to do it, but they're not always the best security. And we've been trying to fix those security problems and improve them for many years. However, blockchain was designed from the ground up as it was originally designed for Bitcoin. So it was designed with transferring value of a currency from one party to another from day one. And that's what it's best at. So if you think about an internet where the core principle is transferring value from one party to another, then you think about all kinds of applications that arise out of this concept of, well, what if I could transfer value or transfer ownership? So of course, as I mentioned, like something like a property deed works incredibly well, or an e-government service. So if I want to be able to sell my house to you, I can use the blockchain to transfer the ownership of that house because it's highly secure and I can prove through a digital token that I can exchange value from one person to another. It's trustless. And this is something that's absolutely brilliant about the technology. So you can use it for something that is, very serious. For most people, buying a house is the most serious transaction they will have in their lives, to something that is actually much less serious, like buying an item in a game, which is what we do. You can buy a sword or a horse or a racing car or something like that, because the principle is the same. You're transferring value from one party to another. And I think that this is why, we're an entertainment company and we focus on entertainment because we think that's how we'll achieve mass adoption of blockchain technology. But the technology itself has much, much broader reaching implications.
Yes, indeed, there are. I guess we are just the early stage of the blockchain development. As you mentioned, there's so many different, I guess, opportunities where we can further develop. I think I already seen quite a lot of companies using blockchain technology to create the smart contract to transfer the deed, as you mentioned, for
Mhm.
properties and even for intellectual property for
Yes.
IP rights, even for a game. So the capable possibility is endless. So even gaming, right? So
Mhm.
like recently, Visa just said they just bought a CryptoPunk NFT for roughly about 150K, and they want to have a seat at the table as the crypto economy
Mhm.
evolves. So what makes NFT very valuable? Why people are willing to pay so much
Sure.
just for something they cannot even touch?
So I think there's many different things at the heart of this, but I think that the two principles that guide it mainly are scarcity on the one hand, and the other part is utility. So let me talk about scarcity first. So with digital items, one thing that I think we've become accustomed to over the last 20 years of internet technology is that digital items essentially have very little value in and of themselves because usually they're able to be copied infinitely. If I have a JPEG, I can make 100 million copies of the JPEG. And so, what value does the original JPEG have? Because I can make copies so easily. The same thing with a piece of text. You can publish it on a website, but I can cut and paste the text into somewhere else. So, so the problem is that the first World Wide Web was all about the dissemination of content, but the protection of that intellectual property was not very good. And so what we've seen is a rise of things like streaming services, for example. So streaming services are probably the best way in which digital rights management has been able to take place because, when we first invented MP3s, people transferred and shared music, and we ended up with lots of copyright problems because there was not a great copyright management system. Blockchain solves that because thanks to the fact that you can put smart contracts into those NFTs, you can embed the royalty and copyright system into the actual digital file itself. So you can essentially create, an NFT of a music file, and it will pay royalties as you play it, for example. And you can program it to do whatever you like. So the royalty management, the digital rights management is fantastic. And the thing about NFTs is that you can create, if you want, digital scarcity. So I can say that, with CryptoPunks, for example, they made 10,000 of them and they're not making any more. And because each one is identifiable on the blockchain, you can see the provenance of that piece. And so you know that this is number 532 of 10,000 or and so on. And so that scarcity, of course, as you know, with economic principles, does drive demand sometimes because when there's more demand and there's scarcity, then demand can increase because also as people are holding on to what they perceive as being valuable, then scarcity increases and demand increases. Um,
Absolutely.
so there's that part of it. And I think that digital scarcity, has been driving a lot of the initial enthusiasm around NFTs in the first half of this year. And that's also coming from the fact that, we came from an environment where there was, let's just call it hyperinflation, because, you can print as many JPEGs or text files as you want. Whereas now, when there is the ability to control numbers, things have value. Um, the second part, which I actually think is more important than scarcity, is utility. And so utility is a term that we usually ascribe in the token worlds because it's a little bit more generic, but it's about having a use case for what you do with that token. And this is because many tokens were originally conceived as alternatives to currency, like Bitcoin, and ways to transfer value from one party to another. But we believe that the more utility that a token can have, or whether it's an NFT or other token, then the more potential value it has. Because when we think about what's valuable to us, well, something's valuable to us because we can use it for something. And there's a reason that the US dollar, for example, is more useful than other currencies because it's more widely accepted and more useful for things. And so what we try to do when we look at creating NFTs as a game company is we try to think about how can we make them as useful as possible. So I can make, for example, a Formula One car to play in my game, and then it has a use case. You can use it to play in the game. You can have it as a collectible because you enjoy Formula One. And those are two use cases. But if I then unlock a feature and allow you to stake it, or essentially, put it on deposit to earn yield, and put it into a rental pool and allow other players to use it and get paid for that, there's another piece of utility. If I allow you to bring it into a second game, there's another piece of utility, and so on and so on. So the more utility I can offer to that token, then the more value it will have to you as a player, and hopefully the more desire you will have then to buy one.
That sounds so cool. I mean, it reminds me back in the earliest day, if I remember correctly, back in 2017, the first NFT project, or one of the first, would be CryptoKitties.
Mm-hmm.
And CryptoKitties has this unique kitty, and each kitty has like a digital NDA, and
Mm-hmm.
where they can mate and actually make a baby, and uh, either kitty A and kitty B made together will turn to be a kitten C,
Mm-hmm.
which what you mentioned about scarcity is, every one of them is unique.
Yes.
So since back in 2017, I think there was one record-breaking transaction that was 117,000 for one CryptoKitty
Mm-hmm.
back then. But then now I think every day we have a record-breaking moment,
We
especially
do.
on the OpenSea. Yeah.
We
So,
do.
but between the younger and the older generation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
who are more traditional, as you know, how do you think you can bridge the vision on the concept of owning a digital asset?
Sure. I think it's difficult, for I'll put my hand up as a middle-aged guy. It's difficult for somebody like myself who's, been around since before the web and before computers were widely used
You still look
mainstream.
so young.
Thank you. I think that, I'm used to the idea that digital items have no intrinsic value, that they're just representations of other things or copies of other things. So it took a while, honestly, it took me a good 6 months to get my head around, even being in this business, to get my
Wow.
head around and getting comfortable with the idea that this digital item could be unique and could not be copied, because you almost take it for granted after 20 years of, you know, a digital image being able to be copied just by clicking, Control C or something like that. You expect that that's possible. And so it takes a while for you to reorient your thinking. Um, that said, I do think that blockchain technology has very, very wide reaching impacts, potentially on the younger generation, because I think what we're going to do now is we're going to really address a lot of financial literacy, because I find that, particularly in Western culture, talking about money is something that's often discouraged as being something that, it's like something that you just don't talk about because it's impolite. You don't talk about your salary. You don't talk about anything because it's not polite. And the problem is that then we rob the children of the generation of the opportunity to learn about money and how to manage money because it's not talked about openly. And so one of the things that I've noticed is that, within the blockchain community, as you start to get into buying and owning digital content, and the fact that there are, very robust marketplaces like OpenSea where people can trade their digital content, players tend to become very savvy, financial experts about the price of their content, what they can do with it, where they can earn yield for their digital items, etc. They become financiers essentially, and so there's a fantastic I think indirect financial education that's happening as a result of kids owning content in games. And they've already been doing so in Minecraft and lots of other places until now. But I think
Right.
blockchain will accelerate this because there's an actual, in-game economies have gone from a virtual concept to an actual economy.
Absolutely. That reminds me of the latest development, especially in the developing countries during the pandemic period. Lots of us lost jobs, and they wouldn't be able to bring the essential food on the
Mm-hmm.
table. So, like Philippines, I think is one of the good example that a lot of them have turned themselves to be a gamers,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to play to earn and ultimately to be able to bring food to the table. So
Yes,
yes,
I
yeah.
think
Do you have
and
any?
it's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I think that's a particularly interesting trend, as you mentioned, play to earn, because when we've developed games in the past, we've always thought about two different kinds of player groups in all the games we make. There are typically the players who have lots of time, but very little money. And those are often students and young people, and people in developing countries too. And then on the other hand, we have people who have lots of money, but very little time. So think of the business people who are on the train commuting to work, and so they have disposable income, but maybe they only have 20 minutes while they're on the subway to play a game. And so we've always thought about how you bring these two groups of people together, the people with money and the people with time. And through blockchain gaming, we can now do that. And I think Axie Infinity, which you're referring to, particularly with the Philippines audiences playing, um, Axie Infinity is the best example we have to date of this play to earn model, where they have brought these two audiences together, people with time and people with money, and created a kind of a virtuous cycle within the game where they can benefit each other, because the players who have time are playing in the game and generating rare assets in the game that are desirable for the players who can afford to spend money on them. And so they spend their money on the rare assets, and then they trade them, and they play kind of a different game based on the same ecosystem, trading assets, whereas the other players are playing and spending their time to earn. And at the end of the day, everybody benefits, because everybody gets out of this economic ecosystem what they're looking for. And I think the fact that we can actually create jobs for people that make a living wage for them out of gaming is an incredible thing.
Absolutely. This is a very meaningful, I guess, cause to encourage them to continue to be able to contribute and like make them happy at the same time to be able to sustain themselves and bring essentials to the family. So
Mm-hmm.
and for that, I really appreciate the latest development. So for the past 30 days, CryptoPunks on OpenSea recorded transaction volumes 200 and 200,000, over 200,000 Ether, or roughly 800 million, based on Ether recent price. So, how do you see the future of NFT like 10 years from now? And particularly, which categories of NFT are you bullish on?
Okay. So 10 years is a long time.
It is. It is. Maybe let's
10,
say 3 to 5 years from now.
don't forget, if you go back 10 years, Angry Birds hadn't even been launched yet.
That's right.
so so mobile had only just started. So I think one of the things about NFTs is, I think blockchain is here to stay. I think it's just a matter of time before blockchain becomes an essential part of the infrastructure of all internet transactions, because there's no reason why every financial transaction and every transfer of value transaction on the internet should not be underpinned by blockchain. And and blockchain's not new. It's been around for a long time. The focus on blockchain has been primarily from fintech and looking at banking applications. Um, but honestly, banking applications are not fun. And what tends to happen is that mass adoption of new consumer technology usually happens through entertainment, because people don't download new banking apps unless they have to. They don't do it because they're like, oh, I can transfer much more smoothly now. Um, that's different than, oh, have you tried this new game? We're all playing it. Come play. That's entertainment draws people in. And so I think that, one of our roles as an entertainment company is to help evangelize for blockchain. So if you ask me about 10 years from now, I think all of our commercial transactions on the internet will be underpinned by blockchain. And this will be interesting because that infrastructure will then be interlinked with games and entertainment as well. So of course, what we're starting to see just, with games like Axie Infinity scratching the surface of, I think this play to earn model and this idea that assets inside games will be tradable and transferable, this will be the norm and very widespread. And for gamers, it will be incredibly exciting because I think every gamer, like the idea behind games is to have an alternate reality and to be able to do things that you can't do in the physical world. And so I think that's part of some of the fun. So, I love motorsports, for example, and every game out in the market for the most part is siloed. You race motorcycles, you race F1 cars, you go off-road, and you pick a game for each one. But as a petrol head, I want to be able to race all of those cars and everyone together in the same place. Because you always wonder what would happen if I race the superbike against the F1 car, against the off-road car, and you make those bets like, around the schoolyard with your friends. And the beauty of NFTs is now, because these assets are all interoperable, we can bring them all into the same venue and find out what happens. Because
Right.
maybe this is not something that would happen in the real world, because maybe, you're not allowed to bring the MotoGP bikes onto the Formula One track because they won't allow it. Well, we can do it in the virtual world. And so I think that's part of the excitement. And once all gaming becomes like that, then I think you will find we slowly move towards a bit of a metaverse, because people in the gaming community already find a lot of their identity in their avatars and their characters that they use to play games. If you spend an hour a day playing a game as a particular character, you relate to that character, and all the people you socialize in the game world with view you as that character. And so once that character is an NFT and you own it, and you can modify it, and you can customize it to your own look, you can dress it, you can outfit it, you can give it swords and armor or whatever the game environment is. But more importantly, you can then bring it with you to every game you play. Then it makes sense that you start to really invest in this character. And so then that character starts to become a digital self.
Yeah, so the key is the interoperability. I
Yes.
think this is the key, definitely. So I've been tracking Animoca brands for quite some time. Recently, in May, Animoca brands has finally announced the status of unicorn. So congratulations! I'm
Thank
very
you.
super excited for you. But to a lot of people, they actually may not know what is Animoca brands. Can you
Sure.
give me a little bit more details?
No problem. So as we've alluded to, we make games. So we're a game developer and publisher, and we make a wide variety of games, particularly focused on brand partnerships. So we work with people like Formula One and MotoGP, Formula E. We work with football clubs, etc., as well as over probably 300 different entertainment brands. Everybody from Disney and Marvel to Panini trading cards, you name it. And so we make cool games and NFT projects based on those IPs. At the same time, we've also spent a lot of time trying to be a good supporter of the blockchain game ecosystem, because when we got into this area at the beginning of 2018, there were very few players, there were very few companies in the sector, and particularly there was no money in the sector because it was brand new and there was no venture capital, nobody supporting it. So we decided, to be not just good citizens, but also in our own self-interest to support the ecosystem, because we believed in this segment and we wanted it to grow. So we started making small investments into other blockchain game companies, marketplaces, digital wallets, infrastructure, etc., things involved in our blockchain game ecosystem. And then this kind of snowballs over time, and we continued this strategy of investing in the ecosystem. So today we probably have, close to 100 investments in the ecosystem as the greater community has grown. And so I think, sometimes people know us more for our investing activities actually than the games that we make.
Sure. So one of the top NFT collector, Whale Shark, make a statement or comment that 99.9% of the NFT projects are likely to fail. I
Mhm.
quoted him back in March this year. What is your view on this statement?
Well, I'd say that when I think of how it compares to games, entertainment products are inherently risky. Everybody says you make a movie or you make a video game, you have a very small chance of success. Um, However, the ones that are successful are incredibly successful, so that's why people
Right.
do it. Um, and so I think I disagree with Whale Shark on the 99.9%, but it could be 70%. um, and I think that's why when people ask me about investing in NFTs, I tell them that actually I think investment is the wrong term for it, because at the end of the day, when you think what we create in games, we're creating in-game items. And so the fact that you can own your in-game items is incredibly cool, but I don't think that you should approach it from an investment mentality. I think you should approach it and say, look, if I go and play a traditional game today and I spend $10 to buy content, what do I have? I have the content in the game and I can spend time and I can use it and that's it. But am I ever going to get my $10 back? No, I will never get it back. So I have spent $10. If I play a blockchain game and I spend $10, I buy an NFT in the game and I can always sell that NFT. Now, some people are thinking, oh, well, maybe I can sell it for 10 times or, something like that. But actually, if you can just sell it for $1, at least you get $1 back. You get something, and something is better than nothing. And I think that's
True.
what, for the mass market of gaming, that's the important difference here is we're going from a world where people get nothing back to a world where they get something back. And I think that is a seismic shift and should be
Yeah.
people's focus.
Yeah. So from Animoca brand's point of view, how do you tackle the investment risk associated with the NFT projects? You mentioned that you
Hmm.
perhaps 70% are likely to fail.
So I think what we do is we always take an ecosystem approach. So we have a couple of philosophies. I think one of them that's very important is that it should remain an open and competitive ecosystem. We want things to be as open platform as possible. We encourage people to develop on a very wide variety of different blockchains using different tool sets because we think all of this competition is healthy. And also, blockchains are not silos. They can be interoperable. You can build bridges to transfer tokens between chains. So the fact that many chains exist and compete doesn't prevent us from still having an interoperable universe, which is very important. So we think that all that competition is very, very healthy, and we support it, and we support it through our investments as well. Um, I think, in addition, we really try to focus on being able to help our companies work together. And as a relatively major player in the sector in terms of our own products, it means that very often the companies that we invest in, we will use those products within our own ecosystem amongst our own companies, or introduce them to other companies we've invested in to work together. So I think we can be quite a matchmaker from that position. And in an area where most of the companies are very young, I think that can be helpful to them. I think one thing that's interesting is to remember how young this business segment is. I would say probably more than 50 companies we've invested in didn't exist before the COVID pandemic.
Wow.
They've
Amazing.
been they've been built during the pandemic,
Wow.
which
Cool.
tells you how new a business we're in.
Absolutely. So I'm curious if any of the startups, want to approach to any market brands for
Sure.
funding opportunities, what should they do?
Okay, so I have two different paths. I think if you're a startup, one thing that I would very much recommend is that we have an accelerator in partnership with Brink that we have launched in Hong Kong.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is a fantastic way, particularly if you are still at concept stage. This is a fantastic way to be able to get funding, to get access to a great team of mentors, and the way that the accelerator program works essentially is that each of the teams that's admitted into a new class receives a certain amount of funding. I think it's around $100,000. And in
That's a
exchange,
good
obviously,
start.
yeah,
That's a good
for a bit
start.
of equity,
Mm,
but most importantly, gets access to mentoring and the ecosystem. And
the
I think,
network.
yeah, and so I think it's the networking and being able to find business partners and really get into the industry that's often very helpful, because some of the challenges that startups often have is, I think, thinking through some of the issues that might lay ahead of them. And so I think the mentorship really helps when they can talk to a team that maybe has, much more experience and has gone through some of those difficulties before.
Great. So what are you currently working on?
What am I currently working on? I'm spending most of my time talking to potential investees, so companies who come to us looking to partner, and also talking to brands. So I spend a lot of time talking to, sports leagues and entertainment companies, et cetera, who have great IP that we think would be fantastic for the blockchain. I think the last group, which I didn't mention, is also I spend time talking to traditional game companies, because one of the things we really want to do is encourage traditional game companies to join, the world of NFTs and blockchain games. And so we're trying to do what we can to work with traditional game companies to help them maybe transform some of their existing content, because they have incredible content with great audiences, and we would love for them to bring their content to the blockchain as well.
Absolutely. I think I would love to own a Mario NFT.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Robbie. I am so happy hosting you today. One last question. Do you have any final words to the audience today?
No, not at all. I think the main thing is, if you haven't already gotten involved in the world of blockchain games, please give it a try. Go to OpenSea, check out what's, interesting NFTs to collect, and definitely come to one of our game sites. Whether it's Formula One, F1 Delta Time, or our new Rev Racing. Go to Rev Racing, and we have tons of cool cars and in-game racing simulations. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't have to be expensive, despite the fact that CryptoPunks sell for millions of dollars. Blockchain games it's about being accessible, and there are tons of great games out there that are very accessible. So give it a try. Um,
Absolutely. Well, speaking about cars, thank you so much for sponsoring 1000 Rips game on cars to our audience as an NFT giveaway. So this is a highlight. We have a really cool game on Rips car, and you can play, you can own, you
yep,
can yeah keep it.
definitely.
Yeah. So there's so many utilities functions there. So once again, thank you so much, Robbie.
No problem. Thanks, Bowie. Thank
Have
you,
a good
everyone. Have a
one.
great
Thank
day.
you.